Continuation of Chapter 12. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Nijaya Paraya Sektya Chalannapyachalah Paraha Kevalam Muni Samvedha Rahasyamidamuttamam Chalatvameva Vyaparo Vyaparasaktiruchyate Sektya Sarvamidam Drishyam Sasarja Paramah Puman. The secret, known only to the sages, is that the movement on the immovable self is by itself motionless. For example, when you are in a moving train, the scenery outside seems to be moving along with you. In reality, the scenery is motionless. The perception of this motionless movement is termed as Shakti or power. Everything seen is created by the Supreme Person through His own power. Vyaparastu pravrittischa nivrittiriti cha dvidha nivrittistha yatra sarva matmaiva bodhiti shrutihi. Activities are of two categories. One is the result of the manifestation of power, the other subsidence of the power. The Shrutis say, quote, when all has become self, unquote, they refer to the subsidence of all the activity into the self. Nanatvam dvaita kalastham gamyate sarvamityatah abhuditi pade natra vyaparaha kopi gamyate. Continuing with his answer, Bhagavan says, all this or sarvam is referred to the dualistic vision of the seeker. The self has manifested itself as the activity in this objective world. Atmaiveti vinirdesha dviseshanam samantatah atmanyevopasamhara stajjatanam prakirtitah. The Shakti or activity is dependent on the Atma or self for its sustenance. On the contrary, the self can remain by itself without or with activity. Atmaiveti, it is the self alone that is the reality. Therefore, in the end, all the activity should subside into the self alone. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Vinasaktim narasreshtha Svarupam na pratiyate Vyapara ashrayaschete Dvinama sakti ruchyate. Even though the self is all-powerful and it is the source of all the activity, without Sakti or activity, one cannot become aware of the self. Power is of two types, the static and the dynamic. Vyaparo visvasargadi karyamuktam manishibhihi ashrayo dvipadam sreshtha swarupannatiricyate. The learned say that the base or surface for all the activities in this world is only the self. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Swarupamanyasapeksham naiva sarvatmakatvatah saktim vrittim swarupancha yayevam veda vedasaha. Continuing with his explanation, Bhagavan says, neither the activity of the world nor the act of seeing the activity or becoming aware of the activity on the self is possible without the presence of the Shakti. The sustaining power of Shakti is self. However, without Shakti, you are not aware of the self. The electricity is the cause for the glowing bulb, but without the bulb, you will never know the presence of electricity. वृत्तेरभावे तु सत्तो नानाभावो न सिद्ध्यति सक्तासक्त्यातिरिक्ता च धृत्तेर्नैव समुद्भवः. The movement or Shakti, which is the cause for the diversity in the world, cannot exist apart from the self. Yadi kalena bhavita jagatah pralayo mahan abhedena swarupeyam vyaparo linavad bhavet. Jagatah pralayo mahan. Sooner or later, in the course of time, the great dissolution of the universe takes place. Then the whole universe merges into the one self. Sarvepi vyavaharoyam na bhavet shaktimantara na srushtirnapi vijnanam yadetat triputimayam. The objective world is full of activity in the form of triads. It is because of the presence of the Shakti we are aware of the self, the activity, the seer and the seen. Swarupamashrayattvena vyapara sarga karmana namabhyam uchyate dvabhyam saktireka paratpara. The one transcendent reality is known by two names, the Self and the Shakti. The Self is the ground on which the Shakti plays. Vatsa satyam dvidhagamyam lakshanena cha vastutah lakshanenochyate satyam vastutastvanubhuyate. Some acknowledge the existence of Shakti alone. They ignore the existence of the underlying self. To such seekers, one has to indicate or point out the base, which is the supreme reality, the self. Tasmat svarupa vijnanam vyaparena cha vastutah tatasthyena cha sakshat vividham samprachakshate. The self or reality or truth can be comprehended in two ways, by indication and by experiencing the reality. By indication, it is pointed out as that which is in the heart cave or Hridaya Kuhara. And by being aware of the undercurrent power which is present in all activities, we experience the reality. Swarupamasayam prahur vyaparam tata lakshanam vritya vijnaya tanmula masaye pratitishthati. Vichara or search for the self can be done only through activity. The source or self, which is the sustenance for Shakti, can be known only through Shakti or activity or power. Swarupam lakshanope samlakshanam cha swarupavat tadatmyenaiva sambandhas tvanayo samprakirtitah. The attribute of self is Shakti and the attribute of Shakti, the self. Therefore, Shakti and Shiva are inseparable. Tatastha lakshanenaivam vyaparakhyena marisha yato lakshyam swarupam sya nitya vyaparavattatah. The self is known only by its attribute, which is the Shakti. Due to its association with the Shakti, the self, though motionless, always seems to be in movement.